And you open the door and you step inside. We're inside our hearts. Now imagine your pain is a white ball of healing light. That's right, your pain, the pain itself, is a white ball of healing light. I don't think so.
Released in 1999 to much critical furore, the adaptation of Chuck Palahniuk's novel Fight Club, released in 1996, saw Fincher really once again coming into his own, as here we have a director now who, having established his style both with a string of hits with both The Game and Seven, shaking off the shadow of Alien 3, Fincher now saw it was voiced as this exciting new voice in independent cinema, and certainly Fight Club would be seen as the evolution of that style. Here, Brad Pitt and Edward Norton play a pair of Generation Xers failed by society in many ways, who find through an underground fight club a new voice and a new lust for life as they embark on a campaign of mischief, mayhem and soap, all the while drawing in the enigmatic Marla Singer. But is there more to this story than there seems? I'm Elwood.
I'm Kim.
And you're listening to Movies and Tea. Let's take it to the booth. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Movies and Tea. Tonight we're obviously talking about Fight Club from 1999, greatest movie year ever, and this is probably one of the films which is, when we look at the Fincher's filmography, is probably one of the films which has been most discussed over the years. Not only for the fact that it's a film that, when it was initially released, was kind of a critical and commercial flop, however, through word of mouth and video distribution, became a real cult classic, and certainly through re-evaulation has seen many of the media and critics re-evaluate the film and change their opinion of it. But tonight we're obviously coming to it through very sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, myself being a long-time fan of the film, and certainly of its novel, the novelist of its source novel, Chuck Palahniuk, someone I would cite as being one of my big inspirations as a writer, along the likes of Hunter S. Thompson and Bret Easton Ellis, and perhaps to an extent Catherine Dunn, whereas my friend Kim is coming to this as a first-time watcher, certainly adding an interesting element to this conversation, I believe. But Kim, I mean, opening thoughts on this one. I mean, obviously, first-time watcher yourself, and I'm kind of surprised by a film so ingrained in pop culture and that it's one that's obviously not come across your radar up till now.
I'm not gonna lie, Fight Club I thought was about some kind of fighting or boxing or something, okay? So I had a really different understanding of this before I went in, but obviously I knew nothing before I went in. The only thing I realized when I started it was really long, longer than I expected it to be. It was like 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is crazy. But I don't know. My opening thoughts for this was probably that I think Fight Club is not really, on some levels it's my type of movie, but I wasn't in the current mood for it. So I don't have particularly, I didn't feel like I was going to like this a lot. Man, all the likes. I think, the story itself is good. The execution is good. Everything technical about it is done really well. And obviously, this story's main point is the development of the characters. Both Edward Norton and Brad Pitt's character. And it has to be done with so much care to show these two characters. And your main focus is on these two, but you also have all these side people that come in, Marla Singer and whatnot. And they come in and they add a different element to it. And it is really important that I think David Fincher took this project, because it is such a... It's so much like his style to do something like this. A movie with a twist, a movie with such strong characters, and a movie that has a darker side about life and finding something more than the routine in your life, kind of thing.
Definitely so. I think this is really a perfect project for Fincher's style. I mean, it once again fits into that larger world sort of idea that we've obviously explored on previous episodes, where when you look at the Fincher's filmography, there's this feeling that all of it can be taking place in the same world, much like The Wire. It's just we're constantly switching focus to different parts of this city or this world, and with Fight Club, it's really one that takes us from sort of the white-collar working hell and right down into the slums of the Paper Street soap company, and it's one that I think he really perfectly captured the tone of Chuck Palahniuk's novel, and it's big. Having read the novel first before I saw the film, I was surprised of how little was actually cut from the book. There's a few changes here and there, but it's very much a very sort of, page to screen adaptation that Jim Mills has put together. But this is a film I first came to when I was in college, and it was a couple of years after it came out, and I think this is sort of like the perfect sort of age where you're sort of that angry young man, angry at the world, and how society sort of views you, and the fact that you're just like this low-level person who's just constantly being looked down upon by society. And Fight Club takes his ideas that these people that that work as waiters or they push the mail cart could be elevated to something more, that they weren't just these lost children of this generation, and that the idea of them coming back to strike back at the man, so to speak. This is a film where we open through a journey through Edward Norton's synapses up the barrel of a gun that happens to be in his teeth as we reach the end game of Project Mayhem. It's it just hit right from the start. We hit so many Fincher trademarks that you can't think of any other director even trying to tackle a film like this, much less to put it in such the visual style that we get here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think one of the main things that was used here was not only kind of like the dark sets, but one of the main things that really works for this is the characters talking to the camera a lot, like very close-up shots of these characters, and they're talking to obviously the other person there, but they're also talking to the camera. And I think those shots are one of the most powerful in the scene and the most impactful. And David Fincher really captures the perfect moments to use those things to really send the message across in in whichever scene that's being shot.
Yeah, definitely so. And I think also the evolution in just technology as a whole enables the introduction of one of his now key trademarks of the impossible shot. And here he just goes hell for leather with just like, what can we do? What's the sort of craziest shots we can do? So, as I said, we open with the journey through Edward Norton's synapses, camera trailing along the barrel of a gun. We then have this whole outline of where we are with the plan to blow up these credit card companies. So we can now just like zoom straight into the ground, and we can zoom into vans, and we can go. We have a later scenes where we're like going inside Edward Norton's apartment, and we go right into like the gas fixtures, and so we can see how his apartment came to blow up. And it's Fincher. I mean, Fincher's always been a visual director, but he's all here like a director embracing new technology to really push his visions so much further. And I think the fact he was working, making music videos, making commercials, just made that, and he was like constantly on top of these new changes. Whereas other directors, they're going to be like spending 8-10 months working on a film. They're not always going to be up to speed. And here he was like constantly like, well, here's all these new techniques. How can I incorporate it? And certainly, Impossible Shots, it's just the way he moves with the camera here is just so fascinating to watch, and it just really emphasizes and highlights all these different elements of the story, which only add to what's happening in so many ways. It's just on a visual front, this film is just absolutely fascinating to watch.
Visually, I think there's just it's really how he films a thing. There's so much motion to it, and there's so much. I don't know how to explain it.
I'm sure as we get into the story, I mean, we start highlighting some of these parts. So, I mean, we're introduced obviously to the narrator as he's at the end, and then we flash forward to the start, and here Edward Norton plays the narrator, but at the same time he's never given a name. We have the fans of the film often refer to him as being Jack, but he's also goes by a number of nicknames as like Cornelius, Rupert, and Travis, and basically he works at an insurance company and he's a claims adjuster, so he's responsible for deciding whether vehicles should be recalled when they prove to be, horribly fatal to the occupants. He's the one who works the numbers and figures out whether vehicles should be recalled, and because of this, in many ways, he's now suffering from insomnia. And it's through some rather questionable advice of a doctor that he starts attending support groups so that he would know what real pain is. And as a result, finds that by attending these support groups, even though he doesn't suffer from half the conditions, he finds himself able to sleep at night. And this right from the start is just classic Palahniuk. This idea of someone going to initially a testicular support group despite the fact he doesn't have testicular cancer, and then hanging around incest survivors and cancer survivors, and just this way of being able to cry and have this emotional release and these feelings that are so pent up in him. So it's certainly a sort of scene that we haven't seen anyone else certainly try, and I was really curious to know for yourself, as obviously the uninitiated both to both Palahniuk's work and this film, how did you feel about someone attending support groups who has no reason to be there?
It's very like on the border of how do you feel about this? It's one, it's very weird, but at the same time you can kind of see the reasoning behind it. It says a lot about his character, I think. And at the beginning, when you see him do this, it becomes kind of like he's very dependent on it. And there's this feeling of, I don't know, I guess I'm always the type of person that whatever works for you kind of person. So I can accept this, but I think that technically it's not right, because you're feeding off of someone else's pain to make yourself feel better. Yeah. But at the same time, if you think about it now, like once the movie is done and you've seen this whole progression of his character, you can see that there's a lot of, I guess, just this personality that he's hiding, that he's holding back. And this for him, like you said, was not only a release, but at the same time, there's one part in the back that at the end where they talk about fear. And I wonder at some point when I think back to these scenes whether the fear of death through these people who are in whatever stages of cancer or disease or something that's bringing them down makes him feel better. Makes him, I don't know, appreciate life a little bit more, even in the mundanity of it that he has to go through every day.
And I mean, it's here that in these sort of support groups, there's no sort of like judgment on releasing your emotions, which we're taught as a society that we constantly have to hide our emotions, especially if men can't cry and show emotion. They've got to bottle it up inside, and I think this is what perfectly has him. We see the scene where he meets Bob, here played by Meatloaf, and Meatloaf with his bitch tits, because he's a juicer. He's a juicer who's because of the amount of drugs he's taken, it's caused his estrogen levels to go up, and now he has breasts. The fact he's played by Meatloaf is just genius casting, and the fact that nobody ever realizes it's Meatloaf is even better still, and something he's actually very proud of. When he says to people, I was in Fight Club, and they're like, you were in Fight Club? And he's like, yeah, I played Bob. And they're like, oh, you were Bob. So he's very proud of that, and if you watch the making of, you can see him wearing the Bob suit, and he's just so happy. But it's during this sort of scene that, as I said, the whole support group scene is actually inspired by something from Palahniuk's life, along with a lot of these sort of scenes that you see throughout the film. And he was doing volunteer work where he would drive people to support groups, and as he said, it was so cold in Portland that he used to go and sit in the back of the hall, and people just assumed he was part of the group. And by him not saying stuff, that people did actually assume the worst. So that's how he came to inspire this particular scene. But what we see throughout the course of the film, I mean, obviously what starts off as him initially getting his fix through the support groups, which is in turn sabotaged by the arrival of Marla Singer, a fellow faker, and he finds that he can't cry if there's another faker in the room. And this in turn just so wonderfully dark in its in comedy, the fact that she's here in a testicular cancer group, and as she cites, she has more reason to be there because he still has his balls. And it's this playing with language, and just the fact that here we have a script that's not afraid to just like go to some very dark places in terms of like dialogue and action. Is just what I love so much about this film. It's just so, it just appeals to my warped sense of humor in so many ways.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can see that. And plus, like, Marla's this really interesting character also because it challenges Edward Norton's character a lot. Where he just, it feels a bit like, you know, obviously it starts off a bit like a rivalry. He sees her as a threat, and he sees her as someone who can potentially reveal that he's a faker, but he doesn't seem to see that it works the other way around. That not only can he be revealed by her just as much as he can reveal her position as a faker, but at the same time, you also see his, I guess, like, the desperation that he needs this group. These groups, at least, all these groups that he goes to, all these recovery groups. And then just like, you know, when you're fighting over certain things and trying to territory, like, give yourself territory, they separate the groups that they each get and exchange what they want and whatnot.
I mean, Marla Singer, obviously here played by Helena Bonham Carter, in one of her career best, it has to be said.
Yes,
I think,
absolutely.
Here she's, the fact that she's there in a cancer support group smoking, it just really is right from the start just defines, you know, what sort of person she is. She does not care. I mean, we see her later stealing Meals on Wheels meals because she knows that the people they're supposed to go to are dead, but she hasn't bothered to tell anyone, so she's freeloading off that service. And the fact that she's living her own life free of responsibility in many ways, and she's kind of like foreshadows the journey that we see the narrator go on. It's just, while they both are on very different paths, they're sort of what they're achieving is very much the same in many ways. Did you think, or did you view her as being slightly different?
I don't know, she's definitely, like, she's very different from, you mean different from the narrator, right? Like from Edward Norton.
I mean, she's definitely right from the start. She's different from the narrator. I mean, she's like,
yeah.
I mean, she's kind of like this universe's version of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. It's sort of like, obviously we can't have the traditional one in a Fincher world, so what's the most dark and twisted version of that same sort of character we can have, and in that we really get Marla Singer. She's, as I said, she's crass, she smokes, she curses, and doesn't really give a damn about anyone, yet at the same time has this sort of fragility to her where she, for whatever reason, finds herself constantly going back to both the narrator and to later Tyler Durden. So
yeah,
she forms a very unique love triangle between the three characters.
I think one of the best things about Marla is like when they talk about it in the beginning, in that meeting where she just crosses the street with cars just going, and the daringness of her character. And then I don't remember this line exactly, but like they talk about her philosophy of life, that she might die at any moment, but the tragedy is that she hasn't, or something. And
yeah, that's
right. I just find that so amazing, because that type of philosophy of life shows the type of person that she is. Like, she's well aware. Like, it's kind of depressing and sad that she sees life in that way, but at the same time, it's that all-fearing thing that Edward Norton's character lacks.
Now, the first choice for the role of Marla was originally Janine Garofalo. but she turned it down due to the film's sexual content, which we will touch on a bit later. At the same time, they also considered Courtney Love, who in many ways I can see as a basis for Marla. So I'm sure it wouldn't be too much of a stretch for her to play the character. And Winona Ryder was also considered as well. The studio were pushing for Reese Witherspoon, but Fincher felt she was too young. And it was really Bonham's kind of performance in the film Wings of a Dove that really sort of swung it for her to be cast in this role. So I think maybe it's just the fact that much like Tim Burton, she doesn't seem to own a comb. I think would have, cause she has that crazy hair, which just like when I was reading the book and I thought Marla Singer, it's just like, yes, this is perfect for this character. How she looks, and there's so little actually done to her appearance. I mean, yes, she wears some really outlandish things, and she has that sort of lighter sort of makeup there, but just with Bonham kind of general appearance, it's just so perfect for the role of this character, and just the way her attitude and general sort of fearlessness that she brings to the role, because it's not a sort of role you can half-ass. You have to really fully commit to this character, otherwise it's going to come off as being overplayed and not have its same sort of presence that you need for this character.
Yeah, but yeah, it's really good because she has that perfect amount of drama, I'd like to say. Because in reality, Marla's character is quite dramatic. Like, she's very... There's a lot of things about her that's very just out there. Very loud. But at the same time, she's also a very quiet character. She keeps a lot to herself and keeps a lot of those feelings and expressions and how she feels and all those things. But it never feels over. And, you know, I have to say, Helena Bonham Carter, I don't know if I've seen her in a role that's been as well balanced as this one, I would like to say.
She was almost enough to convince me to watch the Harry Potter movies, but you know, then I saw Sense. Realised that it's going to be like 6 movies of Emma Watson acting I'm going to have to endure, so I thought, yeah, maybe not.
Well, and Helena Bonham Carter in Harry Potter is only in like the last few. She's not in the first few, so...
I know, I suppose I should have viewed it from that respect, but... no, for the role of the narrator, I mean, obviously here we have Edward Norton. Originally the studio were pushing for Matt Damon and Sean Penn, but it was the Norton's role in the People vs. Larry Flint that really sort of made him push for Norton to be cast. Now, I hadn't actually seen Edward Norton in anything prior to this, so this is my first sort of taste of Edward Norton acting, and I think he's a really interesting actor, and certainly when you look at his filmography, he's done some very interesting roles over his years. I watched this and I watched American History X sort of back to back, and those roles are kind of very polar opposite, but very sort of powerhouse roles, so it was very interesting to see him playing the beta male here, especially after playing such an obvious alpha male in American History X. Are you a fan of Edward Norton, or where do you sort of stand on his?
Well, I mean, seeing as I watched Fight Club like 3 days ago, it's not really like... Yeah. I've already seen I've seen a relative good amount of Edward Norton, and I do like his acting quite a bit. Obviously, I've seen American History X, and I've seen him in Red Dragon. I've seen him in Illusionist is one of the bigger movies that I like of his. I recently saw Incredible Hulk, so I saw him in that.
He is Bruce Banner, isn't he?
Yes, he is. And then I saw him in Pride and Glory, the one with Colin Farrell. I mean, I've seen him in quite a bit of things. And Grand Budapest Hotel, he's in that. So there's a good bit of movies that I've seen of him. I relatively do like his characters a lot. This one obviously is, like you said, it's more toned down. He has a lot of issues. For lack of a better word, he has a lot of issues. This movie is very, very wordy. There's a lot of, like, cryptic talk and philosophical kind of notions that they're trying to put through about the characters and about life and about just everything has a lot of metaphor and a lot of different things that are attached to it. It's not a bad thing, but it feels, sometimes it can get a little bit, it gets wordy in a very weird way.
Yeah, I mean, this is classic Palahniuk. I mean, Palahniuk, through his works, is very sort of social satire. He observes the world around him and emphasizes its quirks, especially in his early works. So when you look at his books like Fight Club, like Survivor and Invisible Monsters, it's all about highlighting these quirks of society and these often posing these questions of that you probably wouldn't even give 2 seconds thought to, yet he fascinates himself over, like, why do they only hire women to wear the costume suits in Disney World, and these sorts of twisted questions he likes to pose himself. And certainly this is very much seen throughout Fight Club. I mean, the fact that here with the narrator, I mean, he's a slave to the IKEA lifestyle, as he says. He spends his days leafing through the IKEA catalogue, trying to figure out what his apartment needs. And I have to admit, the amount of times I've been to IKEA and done the exact same thing, and like wonder what dish pattern defines me as a person. Like, could I make my lounge look as good as the one in IKEA? And these musings on, like, the fact that, you know, in the future the corporations are going to name everything, and I have to say I'll be down with Planet Starbucks for sure. And it's really through this. I mean, this is the life he sort of built up for himself, where he has these. He's convinced himself he's happy with this life. He's constantly on the road. The people he meets are always single 7 friends, and the introduction of Tyler really shakes this up, and it's really a chance encounter that the pair have. They just happen to be sitting next to each other on the plane, and through this sort of chance encounter that the sort of course is set, really, for the narrator to be shook out of his life. I mean, right from the start, he's sort of like he's given no sort of choice to give up his old life, because it's basically blown out of his apartment window, because he comes back to find his apartment's been blown up through a gas leak, further forcing him to reunite with Tyler, and the pair heading off in a very unique direction, should we say. So when we look at the character of Tyler, I mean, he's obviously in many ways very sort of polar opposite to the character of the narrator. And I think it's perfect casting, the fact that they went with Brad Pitt for the role. I mean, they were talking about Russell Crowe taking on the role, but I think Pitt is more accessible. He's got that everyman sort of charm to him, yet at the same time embodies what Tyler Durden is. He's this kind of mythical, ideal man of who, you know, male viewers in particular could like associate themselves with wanting to be like. And he sort of embodies this, and at the same time has this sort of very carefree, consequence sort of free attitude to the world. And kind of in the same way to the narrator, he has this very unique philosophies around the world. It's just here, while the narrators are sort of more rooted in like order and finding completion, the philosophies of Tyler are in destruction, self-destruction, causing anarchy, chaos, and disrupting the system, basically. So it's fascinating the fact that these two people with such polar opposite ideals could somehow be brought together. But I mean, how do you find the character Tyler from that initial sort of introduction? Do you find him like too sort of full of himself, or do you think that he has that sort of charm to him?
I think he's charming. Like, at least in the eyes of the narrator, who is kind of like an everyday normal person, right? He goes through the routine of life, everything that's is very simple and very just too routine. And he's a very normal guy who is struggling to be normal in a certain way. Like, he's finding this it's causing him insomnia and stuff like that. And when he meets Tyler's this burst of character. It's challenging the things that he knows, and it's challenging the personality that he is, and just really carefree, kind of the person that he's not, because Tyler is a person that kind of lets it all go and is just all about the going big and don't care and whatnot. And the narrator isn't like that. He's more grounded. So Brad Pitt being, I have to just say this. I mean, I didn't know Russell Crowe was in line for this role, but thank goodness it wasn't Russell Crowe. I would not have liked, this would have been a different movie experience with Russell Crowe. And probably one that I wouldn't have liked very much.
Yeah.
Because I don't see Russell Crowe having that ability to, that's not saying he's a bad actor, I'm not a big fan of him, but Russell Crowe is not a bad actor per se, but at the same time, like, this role fits Brad Pitt so much better in what he can achieve with it, and the character, and just, I don't know, just the natural charm that he can carry, and being kind of this somewhat unhinged kind of characters that his character needs to, that Tyler needs to carry through in so many of those scenes in the Fight Club, or just being beat up, and just at the, you know, as the movie goes along, he kind of really lashes out, right? So it becomes a pretty intense character, and Brad Pitt has that kind of charm, but he can pull off the unhinged, and he can pull off that intensity that needs to be done. Whereas, you know, if they had carried Russell Crowe, I think the only part he would have done was the intensity minus a lot of the charm, like the unhinged charm kind of thing. I don't know, like the bad boy. I don't know what you could.
Yeah, I think when you look at Russell Crowe, he's kind of like Gerard Butler and Carl Urban, and the fact that he's more this sort of brute. Yeah, they can pull off like the rugged feeling, but they don't have that same Brad Pitt kind of, I don't know, smooth talker look, I guess. I don't know, smooth talker bad boy. I don't know what you call that. Yeah. I think you nailed it right on the head when you say he's a smooth talker, because that's basically how he leads the narrator astray. If you have someone like Russell Crowe, it's more because he's so much of a brute that it would almost seem like he's dominating, he's sort of bullying the narrator into it. And what we want instead is someone to lead the narrator astray through this sort of situation that escalates so gradually that he doesn't realize how deep he's in until he's in. And I mean, this is perfectly seen when we look at the initial sort of fight between the narrator and Tyler in the parking lot of Lou's place. And I think just the fact it's in a bar is so important. I mean, this idea that you go to the bar to find a fight, and this is what these two guys do. They're just having a brawl, and they discover this sort of primal release just by fighting each other that they feel has been missing, and they decide that, you know, we're just going to keep doing it. And by doing it, they find other people who also want to tap into this vibe, in turn creating the Fight Club, which takes place in the basement. And again, this is perfect idea that, you know, you go to the bar to find a fight, and that's what they find. And the fact that it's in the basement because it's an underground club, I think it's perhaps a little literal, but Lou's place is such a perfect grimy place to have this sort of secret club take place. And I love the initial sort of meeting when they have in the basement, and you have that long pan shot as we go through the bar, and we got the Tom Waits Going Out West sort of playing in the background, and how this group sort of gather while they're closing at the bar. You see all the members are like coming out, and they're all following Tyler because they know, you know, what time it is, and just it's just so perfectly sort of sets up. And again, with the Fight Club, the fact that it's not about physical dominance, it's not just about seeing who's the toughest, who's the strongest. It is just this pure therapy, if in the most primal sense, that these guys are finding for themselves. And this is sort of further established when we get into the rules. I mean, these are guys that the rules say that, you know, you fight to one person goes limp or they tap out. So, and there's this self-congratulations between them. It's never like, oh, I bested you. It's sort of like, you know, they congratulate each other on just the fight that they've had. And I think it's so fascinating, even though I think it went over the heads of a lot of critics when they saw it, because they just saw like these grotesque acts of physical violence that are taking place as guys are basically pacing 7 shades out of each other. I think, you know, all of those for a movie about Fight Club, it's really not that much. I don't know. I didn't think it was that much fighting. But then, I mean, I think I got drowned out a little by the time I watched it in a few sittings, so might have not felt as much
because I did it in so many different sittings. But yeah, I mean, the whole underground feeling and this whole Fight Club being there and that whole iconic scene of just, you know, the first rule of Fight Club and the second rule of Fight Club and all that stuff. I mean, everybody knows that even if you haven't seen the Fight Club movie.
Oh, yeah, the student walls, which you got that poster, which is like got the rules of Fight Club. I think I even had the poster, which has got like the Fight Club soap at the bottom, and it's like the rules of Fight Club, and it's the fact that it repeats "you do not talk about Fight Club" twice is to like underline the importance of not talking about Fight Club. Yet, obviously, they do, because you have Fight Clubs leaping up everywhere. And it was kind of funny when this film came out. I think it went over the heads of a lot of people, the fact that it's not just about the Fight Club. As you had all these like unofficial Fight Clubs springing up, and you read in the paper that this monkey see, monkey do attitude, where you would have like young guys like forming secret bare knuckle fight clubs in their school and whatnot to beat the Seven Shades out of each other. So
yeah, but the Fight Club is so much more, right? The Fight Club is meant to be a release, and at the beginning, at least, it's about the release of the characters and just everybody having that equal opportunity of fighting each other, and everything in as we move along becomes, well, at least it's meant to feel like there's no one who's a leader, everybody's the same kind of deal, and this all is there to just for everybody. It kind of builds them a little bit more into tougher characters. Even when you see Bob, who you know, obviously ends up seeing Bob at Fight Club, and that's a surprise.
Yeah, and it's this evolution from the self-help groups we see at the support groups we see at the start, and where these people are now finding themselves again. And as they said, it's like nobody has any status, nobody has any sort of power or title in the Fight Club, and they perfectly emphasize it when they say about like Donnie, the guy who couldn't remember what color ink he orders at work, and it doesn't matter in Fight Club because he's, for those brief moments, he's the god when he pastes the guy who works in the food court. The fact that these guys can like never acknowledge this outside of Fight Club, and we see it when the narrator bumps into each of these characters in their like individual workplaces, and they give them like the subtle nod of recognition, but they don't mention it's sort of like where they've been. And this allure of the secret society, I think, is so intoxicating. You combine that with these mantras that Tyler is plying these members with, this idea that, you know, we're children of this lost generation. And I think this in particular appealed to like applied to like the American audiences, where it's sort of like this idea where like anyone can grow up to be the president. And yes, I mean, now it's obviously very obvious that anyone can grow up to be the president when you look who's in charge at the moment. So I think the same could be said about the British Prime Minister as well, but we digress. But yeah, these people like promise always like you're going to be like grow up to be like rock stars and presidents and stuff, and instead you're viewed as being the lowest of society because you're the guys who like serve food and pump gas and stuff. But we're giving you your power back, and that's like the initial appeal of Fight Club, the fact that these men are tapping into these primal urges again. They're reasserting themselves. It's like, yes, we're men, we fight each other, and in homoerotic situations.
Fight Club is for the people who really feel that they're like the narrator. They're everyday Joes who do an average job, who do a menial job or whatnot, who's kind of lost value of life. And Fight Club kind of gives them back that life, that control, that reason to fight back, that place to release all those frustrations and whatnot that you have. And what's really great about Fight Club is it gives our narrator the power that he becomes more self-assured when he's at work. So he's willing to kind of butt heads with the boss more, point out things that he doesn't like, or just really like act out in his own way.
Oh yeah, the fact he writes these little haikus and then emails them to everyone in the office. These little acts of defiance that he has as he sort of recognizes more in himself. And I think this is where we see like the Fight Club, the fact that when Tyler starts giving them all the pranks to play and their missions, so they go out and they do little pranks such as they're there like destroying aerials, or they're wiping VHS cassettes, and they're putting up fake posters saying that, you know, you can use engine oil on your lawn, you can recycle your pets. They replace all the cards in the airplane for like the health and safety protocols, which was a really great thing. When they gave out the press kit for this, you actually got your own card that you see in the airplane sequence, and it shows like the grown up shoving his hand on the face of the child as he's pulling on their own mask and stuff. It's pretty twisted, but it's pretty funny at the same time.
But, you know, I think where we start seeing the situation change is when the movie takes a turn, in that sense that the narrator starts realizing that Tyler is taking a lot of the credit for building the Fight Club, being the person who created the Fight Club, and kind of never really mentioning him and never giving him that spotlight, and doing a lot of things behind his back.
Yeah, certainly, as we evolve from the Fight Club into Project Mayhem, and it becomes less about this underground sort of fighting group, and instead becomes about them forming this secret militia. And as the narrator says, it's sort of like, why was Tyler building an army? Only Tyler knows. So he doesn't even know why half these things are happening, and it's this slow evolution of these pranks. It's sort of like by getting on that sort of ground level, and you sort of like keep pushing it because the norm is slowly being changed. So you don't really question it because it's being changed that slowly, but it's all under the guise of, oh, we're doing these pranks, we're striking back at society, you know, we're taking back our power. And the fact that they're being led by someone so charismatic as Tyler, I think it only makes it the more believable that these, you know, blue-collar Joes would, these people who just sort of been so oppressed by the society we live in, would choose to go along and do these things that they know are so wrong because they feel so empowered by this man.
Yeah, and you know, I think that Tyler, I think one of the biggest effects of Fight Club, and one of the biggest effects of having this for the narrator is that really turning point for his character when you see him like beat himself up when the boss tries to fire him, and things end up working to his advantage. And it's a very Tyler kind of thing, that you'd see Tyler doing it, but you never imagined a narrator to really break out in this kind of outwardly thing, right? And then he refers to it, I think, as mimicking that first fight that they had. And I just thought it was so entertaining that at that moment it was very entertaining to watch, in all the weirdest reasons, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the fight scene itself did win the best fight scene at the MTV Movie Awards. So credit to Edward Norton for that one. And I love the fact that it's got that James Bond sort of payoff to it. The fact that we have this horrific moment of self-violence where we're watching someone brutalize themselves, crawl across broken glass, and clamber up his boss to basically frame him for beating him, for apparently beating Edward Norton's character up in this office. And the payoff for it is, I'd like to thank the Academy. when for his little performance, just think when you see him like going at the office with his like computer, and he's there whistling to himself, and he's got blood streaming down his face, and it's like, it's just a black comedy. This is so good. And as I said, I think a lot of this may be just my warped sense of humor, but so many moments in this film I just laughed out loud so many times in this film. And I think it's also the fact that it's got that schoolboy sort of mischievousness to it. You know you're not supposed to be rooting for these characters, but you do. The same way that when Marla says something outlandish or crude, such as I haven't been fucked like that since grade school, which is actually a line that was the change by the studio. The studio were balked at the original line was, I want to have your abortion, and David Fincher said, I'll change it. But wherever I change it to, that's it. This will go through the line. So he changed it to, I haven't been fucked like that since grade school. And the studio were like, oh, that's so much worse. And he was like, well, we ain't changing it back because this is what you agreed. And yeah, it's just a very warped mischievousness that, along with this sort of idea of rebellion and stuff, as I say, it's probably why it appealed to myself when I was in that sort of right frame where I was working in the call center, basically being told to go fuck myself every 5 minutes of the day. To have something that says, let's go and strike back and take back control and have this rebellion, this cause this anarchy. It's the very sort of themes that appeal to you when you're a young angry man, and perhaps when you're at slightly age when you should know better, it's still got that sort of mischievousness to it that still appeals. So, but as I said, I was wondering how that would appeal to like yourself, Liam. I mean, these themes of anarchy, of rebellion and stuff, I mean, how did they sort of sit with yourself? Were you able to sort of understand it, or did it seem like very sort of like a very juvenile sort of overreaction to a situation?
Well, I mean, I'm a normal person, normal situation, you wouldn't think about things like that. But films and stories are about a release of your character and finding difference. And there's a certain enjoyability to watching someone who can do that, because, I mean, everyone working a job, who doesn't want to tell their boss to F off every once in a while, right? But, I mean, even in the most, even as people call me, at least I get called to be very nice all the time, there's that whole issue that there's this enjoyment of watching someone being able to do that. And obviously the whole rebellion and vandalism and all the things that Project Mayhem brings is a bit over. But at the same time, for a group of people who met because of Fight Club, it's not exactly hard to imagine because they enjoy beating the crap out of each other. So, if you think about it in the logic of the movie, it does make sense. So, I didn't have a big issue with it. I actually thought most of it was pretty enjoyable, especially starting from that scene where he started beating himself up, and then they were sent on pretty much homework assignments on these little missions of vandalism and stuff like that. It became very interesting to watch where these characters were going to go, because that things are going to keep going their way.
We obviously talked about the club itself and the evolution of that. Now, what I want to obviously talk about here is the relationship side, because obviously we have a very, dare we say, homoerotic relationship between the narrator and Tyler Durden. The fact that these two have such a close bond, and at the same time often shown in such a homoerotic light. I mean, obviously Edward Norton's character's got a gun barrel between his teeth. The Brad Pitt's questions whether they actually need another woman in their lives. And the fact that Marla Singer's obviously seen as this intrusion in their life. The fact that Tyler doesn't want her around. The fact he constantly tells the narrator to get rid of her. Putting the narrator in this position as he describes that he's basically his 8-year-old self passing notes back and forth between his parents, who the relationship in many ways could be seen as being regards to. But I was interested how you saw their relationship, because it's not just really, it goes a lot deeper than just being a friendship. They have a certain bond that goes a lot deeper, and certainly the trust, the fact that Tyler's constantly able to push the narrator not only to living essentially in a squat with him, but also to engage in chemical enlightenment when he gives him a chemical burn with the fun experiments with lye. Yeah. So it's very interesting to see how you saw their relationship.
I mean, their relationship is very, I don't know if you'd call it romantic or if you'd call it just a really solid bromance. But you definitely have a connection there where, like, the narrator is feeding off of the character of Tyler Durden. He kind of motivates him to be more than his normal self, but at the same time, it kind of challenges his character a lot. If you think about one of the ending conversations that they have, it feels like, because he refers to it as being dumped by Tyler when he leaves. So you think about it this way, and in reality, the narrator has dependence on Tyler. Whether Tyler reciprocates it is different, obviously. But I feel like it's definitely escalated further than a friendship. But what to define it exactly as, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Because, I mean, we obviously have these, we even have, like, these moments of jealousy between the narrator when we have the arrival of Angel Face, played by Jared Leto.
Yeah.
The young blonde who turns up and seems to be taking Tyler's affections away from the narrator, so much so that he takes the first opportunity he can just to batter the hell out of him in one of the most brutal scenes of the film, where we see basically him get his face decimated.
Yeah.
Well beyond the point where it even shocks these people who are so hardened to the violence that they see about themselves. And Fincher shoots it in such a much voyeuristic way. The fact that the sound is stripped away, so we just basically hearing meat on meat sounds of slap and thuds, as the narrator basically explains he wanted to destroy something beautiful, and at the same time, I'm not sure if it's this scene or another where he basically says it's like this outpouring of frustration, like for every panda that wouldn't fuck to save its own species, which I think is still a great line. That's what he adds in this sort of interesting elements, the fact that he has these moments of jealousy, the fact that if anyone tries to interfere with his relationship, be it Marla, be it Angel Face, he's prone to these sort of bouts of jealousy and resentment to these people.
I'm not sure if it's, I don't know if I consider it like, you know, it is jealousy for sure. But at the same time, I feel like it's just that these characters that come in strip away that importance that is in the life that he feels is just him and Tyler. And these people walking in kind of pull the attention away. So he becomes useless again. He's not, like the attention is not on him as much anymore. And I think that a lot of his character is about, because everybody seems to view him as a pretty invisible type of person in life and unimportant in person in life, and that sort of character, that Tyler gives him that life. So when the attention is taken away, where Tyler is, say, spending a lot of time with Marla in bed and or going on these vandalism acts with Angel Face, and having these secrets about Project Mayhem that he doesn't know about, he feels left out. And is it really because of, I think it's more the jealousy of that he's not feeling important anymore, that more, and being left out, more than the fact that is it Tyler that does it? Maybe it's because Tyler gives him that identity, gives him that person that he just, I don't know, kind of opens him up a little bit more than the person he was before.
I have to say that it's certainly Brad Pitt spends certainly a lot of time with in various states of undress, which certainly did wonders to appeal it to the gay crowd, and who it's actually Brad Pitt credits in the commentary for the success of the film getting a revival of interest. The fact that it was so picked up by the gay moviegoers, who actually very much appreciated the fact that Brad Pitt spends a lot of time, as I said, whether it's him sitting shirtless in a bath or completely naked bar a pair of rubber yellow gloves. There's a lot to appreciate of Brad Pitt in his prime, to say the least. So
Brad Pitt always likes to show off his body at some point or another. So it's not really like the shining part of the movie, but it gives him a lot of credit. And in our further viewing, I'm gonna talk about another movie that does that really, really well. But yeah, I mean, Brad Pitt generally is a charming person, shirt on or shirt off. So it does add to his character, because he is. I think that also adds on to the wonder of casting Brad Pitt, is that he's so really, like, he is a really, really handsome guy, and he has a great body and that sort, and it gives him so much of that charming hot body kind of hot guy type of thing, right? But at the same time, it also emphasizes the difference between him and Edward Norton. Because Edward Norton's not that. Edward Norton's like the skinny dude, you know? So
he's a little more gangly.
Yeah. He is. So everything here, that's why I think the casting is so important for this, is it really shows the importance of the film the whole way. That makes the most interesting to me is the contrast between these two characters. And just how these two characters eventually, you see them, Edward Norton's character growing, but at the same time, Tyler's character, like Brad Pitt's Tyler, is moving away as well to something a lot more dangerous. So even as the narrator is crossing certain boundaries that he wouldn't have before, Tyler is taking it always a step further.
Yeah, and I think again, this is the what's so great about casting Brad Pitt in this role, because Tyler Durden is supposed to be this embodiment of who the narrator really wants to be, and the fact he's got this sort of boyish charm to him as well, and the fact I think he was only further backed up by the fact that at the same time this film's coming out, Brad Pitt's appearing on Jackass and doing skits with the Jackass guys, and it's sort of like just really sort of played into this persona of who Brad Pitt was, because it was really through Seven that he went from being just the pretty boy actor to being the sort of pretty boy actor that guys could watch and like as well, and I think Leonardo DiCaprio took a lot longer to find that, because DiCaprio for a while was stuck in that rut of doing the Titanic and the beach, where he was just a pretty boy, and it was sort of much later when he was doing things like Shutter Island and Wolf of Wall Street that finally he became the pretty boy who guys can enjoy watching as well. So it's great. I always really like the Pitt years post Seven. I always found those to be the most enjoyable. Everything prior to that was just too much of like, oh, look at this pretty boy, when he's like doing Meet Joe Black and Legends of the Fall and all that sort of nonsense. And I think as I said, when you're playing a character like Tyler Durden, I think it's just going to open up this whole other audience, because they're going to associate you as being this character, and be this whole group of people who see you as being, being this Tyler Durden sort of character. So I think it sort of really opened him up to a lot more roles, even though at the time it didn't seem it would, because of it being such a failure. But certainly it's a film that everyone involved with is very proud of. Chuck Palahniuk was very invested in the film, and you hear that on his commentary track as well, the fact that he talks about how for the premiere that they were all gonna like shave their heads like the space monkeys, and they all had like the fake chemical burn kisses on the hand that they were all gonna show up with, and like Fincher and Edward Norton and Brad Pitt and him were all just going to turn up in like a group of space monkeys at the premiere and stuff. So let's get into some spoilers here. Obviously, I think everyone knows the end of this film, but we'll just put the spoiler in there in case you haven't.
In case you're like Kim and just haven't managed to get around to it until there's a recording for it.
I'm not going to judge people. People watch what they want. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there now. It's
I
not
get
like...
judged a lot, so I know I can feel whoever hasn't seen it. So.
And now you can just, now people want to judge you. You can just say, come to my fight club, then we'll solve this. You got your ideas now of how to solve these issues, or as I like to call Fight Club, the how Kim suitors battle it out. Just what we have to deal with outside the office on a weekly basis. We just pull them all down the basement and say, sort it out between yourselves, guys. Obviously, when we find out that the big twist here, that Tyler is not actually a person, but it's Edward Norton's invisible imaginary friend, he's just obviously, unlike other people, he's just had the balls to go with it, as Tyler explains. So when we have the seats to the upright position, to quote the narrator, moment, how did you find that? Because obviously twists are something that Fincher likes to do, but at the same time he doesn't make it the base of his career, unlike the likes of M. Night Shyamalan. And I think to that extent, I think that's why Fincher's got more longevity and more creativity in his career. But certainly I thought this was it's certainly a good twist. I mean, obviously I had the pre-warning because I read the book going into it, so it probably wasn't as shocking as it was to moviegoers.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, when I went to this movie, I was pretty not knowledgeable about anything about it. So
oh, good.
I
So
think
you
I
got to
had.
enjoy that one.
I think I had an idea. Like, I think I had heard about the twist somewhere. When it happened, I felt like I had seen it, but then I didn't. So, I mean, the twist is really good. I mean, it kind of made, everything ended up making sense. And there was kind of like the desire to kind of go back and look at all these scenes that were happening and how they were technically happening, right? In the past, obviously. And it's a very, I guess the best way to describe this would be a very Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde moment, right? Between the two characters. Which is great, because that's I wonder if that's why Edward Norton got hired for Bruce Banner. But yeah, no, I mean, it's really great, because after this moment is revealed, we start realizing in that final, the big finale to the end of the movie, all that way, we start seeing the whole struggle he has with this character and the interaction that he has with them. And then we see it through, I love the parking lot one where we see, like, in the parking garage, and then we see, like, the security camera, and you just watch this guy going back and forth and falling and whatever. And you see this all in just, this is one person doing all this stuff, and it is the wildest moments, because it kind of explains how everything before, if you thought was unfeasible about how this wouldn't have made sense, all this makes sense now, even on a technical level.
Yeah, I love the fact that even this person he's created for himself, this imaginary friend, admonishes his own behavior. Just as the fact is like, oh, you're now shooting a gun at your imaginary friend next to a truck full of nitroglycerine.
Yeah.
It's like, look at you, running around in your underwear. Look at a crazy person. Just the fact that he's in his own head, the fact he can be admonished by his own imaginary friend. Whereas normally the imaginary friend just keeps pushing and pushing when we've seen this sort of character before. There's never any sort of consequence. It just like, the imaginary friend would just constantly push the character till it reaches some sort of grisly sort of climax, which causes them to snap out of it. Where when it comes to the case of Tyler's basically like, still this sort of self-aware creation. Even though it's basically the narrator sort of fighting against himself for the second time in this film. But I certainly love it when you go back and you see all the sort of sequences, and it shows how it all sort of actually played out. I think that's really sort of interesting. And the fact that when you watch the film again and you look at these sequences, the fact that these scenes are being played very similar to Shutter Island, the same way that you go back and knowing the secret and how you view these scenes sort of very differently, and you can see these scenes playing out and how characters react and how, in particular, the narrator and Tyler Durden sort of interact with each other. Sort of fits perfectly within this endgame. It's not sort of, it doesn't ever feel like something he just sort of pulled out of the air, sort of like, oh, I need an ending. This is it. Sort of the clues have always been there. We just didn't know what we were looking for.
And that really is a nod to Fincher being a really great director and being able to frame these shots and pull off how to execute this through cinematography and everything. That all these scenes make sense even after the big reveal is done. If you go back to watch it, you'll see all these little details and you'll see all these little things that happen, and all the pieces really fit back together.
Just looking at this film, I think it's an absolute fascinating piece of cinema. In a very exciting year for cinema on a whole. I think there's so many elements about this film that just stand up to constant rewatching. There's little details you pick out, such as the little flashes of Tyler that appear throughout the film, and certainly the big payoff at the end where, as Brad Pitt says in the commentary, Mr. Fincher likes to make appearances in all his films. I think, as I say, it's just a film that just stands up to... I've seen it numerous times before, and it just never seems to lose its sort of charm and appeal to myself. I don't... as I said, I just really, really enjoy it, so... But yeah, is there anything else you sort of want to? Any final thoughts on this one?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Further viewing then. If you like Fight Club, what do you pair with it? This is going to be an interesting one.
This is going to be an interesting one. Okay, I'm going to go with one that we've, I think at a certain point in the... I have 3 further viewings. So the first one was, I was watching this movie, and I felt like when we were going through that Project Mayhem and all those things going on, it reminded me a lot of Shopping.
Oh, good choice.
Yeah, so Shopping, Paul W.S. Anderson. We did that as our first episode of Movies and Tea. First ever episode. So that's something that you can all go back and check, so I'm not going to go too deep in it. That's, Paul W.S. Anderson's debut film, and obviously it's not quite as refined as this one, but it has that rebellion kind of theme to it, which works pretty well. Second one that I'm going to go with is the one that I had mentioned before that I kind of left on a cliffhanger and didn't talk about, is very similar to this one, and it was last year's Daniel Isn't Real, which was recently launched on Shudder.
Okay.
Yeah, with our two second generation leads of bigger actors, right? It's Arnold Schwarzenegger's son, Patrick Schwarzenegger, which plays a character very similar to Brad Pitt's character in Fight Club. And it's pretty much right, but this one is not a secret. We know right away that he is an imaginary friend. So Daniel is an imaginary friend that this character played by Miles Robbins, Tim Robbins' son, is playing in this movie. And this is a phenomenal movie. It's one of my favorite movies of 2019, made by Spectrovision. So it's published by Spectrovision, I guess. And then it really embodies that whole imaginary friend thing in more of a psychedelic horror thriller style. So this one would actually pair perfectly with Fight Club, in my opinion. And then I don't know if this movie, that third movie that I'm talking about, is going to is widely released, because I saw it at a film festival and then I never heard about it again. It's called Brockland. It's a Danish movie.
Okay.
It's a Danish movie, and I saw it in a festival back then, and the English title is Sticks and Stones. And what's really great about Brockland is it's a 2018 Danish movie about 2 boys, who is very similar to the characters here, who kind of... There's that whole character of... One character is kind of like a Brad Pitt character, where they're pushing the other character to break out of that safety zone that they're in. And it builds their friendship when they do these kind of... these acts together as like a team. There's a really strong sense of, I don't know, just friendship, and how far they're it's a very deep movie about like boyish things that go on. So yeah, those are my 3 further viewing picks. What are yours?
I've got a couple here, and something just sort of come to me. First off the bat, I would say American History X, just for Edward Norton's powerhouse performance. And again, it's that cult of a belonging. It obviously sees Edward Norton playing a neo-Nazi. And it explores obviously this idea of hate, and we see this character go from obviously being the leader of a neo-Nazi skinhead group, and seeing how he finds redemption and change of belief as through a spell in prison. Really absolute powerhouse performance, and the fact it's shot in black and white by Tony Kaye, the long-serving resident of filmmaker jail. It's Tony Kaye is really one of those phenomenal filmmakers, and while the studio and Edward Norton basically had to wrestle the film from his hands and re-edit it to the extent that he was wanting to have his name taken off the film, but I think on this one of the few occasions where they made the right call, and it turned out to be in this absolute masterpiece of a film, certainly showing a very intense side to Edward Norton's character, and sort of was a lot more superior to someone we mentioned already, Russell Crowe, who obviously starred in the very similar Romper Stomper. Next one I'm going to suggest you check out is from 2002. It's the Korean film H, in which a serial killer named Shin Hyun gives himself up to the police, confessing to a series of particularly horrible murders. Yet, while he's in prison and awaiting the sentence for his crimes, the killings continue. This is a film which builds to a really interesting climax, and I think it's got some interesting ideas that are in many ways similar to this film in terms of like what the twist is, but it's not the same before you start thinking that. Next, I would also say check out Shutter Island. Very similar in many ways to a film that really sort of benefits when you go back and rewatch it and you notice all the little clues and things that you perhaps don't miss on the first time. And the final one being Das Experiment, which is one of a few films based on the Stanfield experiment, where members of the public were assigned roles of being either guards or prisoners, and it sort of looked at the effects of conformity. And this film was remade with Forrest Whitaker and Adam Brody as the experiment. But I would recommend checking out the German version, Das Experiment. It's not particularly fun viewing, but it is a really interesting sort of look at the allure of sort of power and how power corrupts in particular. Now, because we're obviously being such a fan of Chuck Palahniuk as well, I recommend you check out the book for Fight Club, and also recommend checking out a couple of his other books. If you like horror, check out Haunted, which is basically a collection of short stories as he tries to play one-upmanship with him, trying to outgross himself. Well, on the social satire side of things, I'd recommend definitely checking out either Survivor or Invisible Monsters as well. So that would be my further viewing. And definitely the book of Fight Club is well worth checking out, even if you've seen the film. It's a great introduction to the works of Palahniuk, and one worth checking out there. So that would be my recommendations there. But yes, thank you again for listening, and as always, if you could hit the like and subscribe button, it really does help us out, and maybe leave us a review. And in the meantime, you can also check out our full archive of episodes, which is moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com, not only for this season but our previous seasons as well, looking at where we looked at Paul W.S. Anderson, Guillermo del Toro, Sofia Coppola, and more recently Ang Lee. And as well as that, you can also check out other bits of fun writing. We've got our Shark Week episodes and our After Hours specials on there as well. But Kim, where do we go next?
Yeah, we're moving forward to 2002, where we go and watch Panic Room.
Yes, Panic Room, a fun little claustrophobic thriller. Again, this time we're moving to the upper side of New York this time, and we get to see Jodie Foster hanging out with a young who's
Stewart.
The chick from Twilight?
Kristen Stewart.
Very young Kristen Stewart with a questionable haircut, and we also get to see the return of Jared Leto with even more questionable hair. All that to obviously come on the next episode. But thank you as always for listening. Thank you to my co-host Kim, and we'll be back next time to talk about Panic Room. Till then, good night.